Steele Murdoch has shown up at Anne Dunn's work. She remembers the last time they were together. She begged him to. Oh, I can't say that on YouTube. Well, she pleaded with him to engage in adult activities with her. That's how you can tell this is a dirty romance novel. It mentions certain adult activities on the very first page.
Argo Font Book Review, Argo Font Book Review.
Steele is a rugged cowboy type with an accent that drives women wild. He's the sort of romance novel hunk that I intensely dislike. He's always insulting Anne because he enjoys making her mad. That's his main form of entertainment. She's so flustered by him that he dominates every conversation. He enjoys being in total control of her at all times. I really hate those kinds of guys. Just always manipulative and controlling. I don't see how that's attractive. That's just mean and toxic. Another thing I don't like about Steele is that his conversations tend to be wandering and indirect. It takes forever for him to get to the point. Sort of like an author who's trying to meet a certain word count. It takes 40% of the book before Steele finally gets around to saying why he's here in Canada. Steele forces Anne to go on a date with him tonight. Chapter 2 is her remembering how they first met. When Anne was young, her father abandoned the family. Just like this book's author, he left Edmonton, Canada, and moved to Tasmania, Australia, where he works as a novelist. 2 years ago, Anne won the lottery and spent all her money on a 6-month trip to see her father. It seems to be a waste of money. She spent the entire time not talking to him and getting mad at her French stepmother. Anne wandered off by herself at night. She was terrified by the strange animal sounds, and she was rescued by Steele, the hunky next-door neighbor. Anne fell in love with him and tried her best to ignore the fact that he spent most of his time flirting with her stepmom. Anne tried seducing Steele, but he rejected her, saying she's only 23, she's too young for him. But now she's 25, so he thinks it's totally okay to have adult activities with her. I don't understand this reasoning. The age gap between the two of them is the exact same. And he still insults her for being young and immature. He treats her like he hates her, like she's a 3-year-old. We see this during the date. Anne is mad that her father abandoned her as a child. Steele repeatedly insults her, saying that viewpoint is immature, self-centered, and backwards. Steele thinks Dad was being selfless when he left his wife and 2 young children without any warning, escaped to another country to marry a younger woman, never saw his kids again, or paid any child support. Does that sound like a man who abandoned his family? Yes! Yes, it does, Steele! Steele argues he knows better than Anne because he's known Anne's father for years, while she barely knows him. That's exactly the point that she's making! His children barely know him because he ran away from them decades ago. Anne gets so mad she starts to leave. Steele orders her to sit down and behave. He questions Anne's sexual preferences, insults her for being too skinny, and orders her to have drinks in his hotel room. Do you see why I don't like this guy? I do not like this guy at all. I don't know why Anne puts up with him. If it was me, I would go back home and lock the door. Steele promises he does not have any inappropriate intentions towards Anne. Immediately after saying this, he grabs her, starts kissing her without permission, and touches certain body parts. When she pushes him away, he claims that was not sexual assault. He was just trying to alleviate the tension between them so they could have an easier time talking to each other. At this point, I think the only way the book could redeem itself in my mind is if Steele gets arrested and Anne's father is forced to pay back child support. Steele finally explains he came to Canada because Anne's father is dying. Maybe. Dad hasn't seen a doctor or anything, but he looks kinda sick and said some weird things. Steele assumes, oh, Dad's dying of cancer, so he flew all the way to Canada to warn Anne. This is dumb. It is a trip that should have been a phone call. We are talking about a trip which is so expensive, only lottery winners can afford it. You'd think Steele would be 100% sure Dad has cancer before spending all that money to warn Anne. Here's a question. How can Steele afford this trip? Why is he so rich? We don't get told what he does for a living. It's hinted he's an executive at a real estate development company, but that doesn't match with the fact that he lives in the wilderness in Tasmania. Steele forces Anne to call her father, who says he's feeling fine, no need to worry. Instead of believing him, Anne insists that she move to Australia. She's forced to quit her job, sell her car and apartment, and break up with her whiny boyfriend John. Steele goes behind Anne's back in order to get invited to the family's Christmas Eve dinner. Mom is enchanted with Steele's charming manner. After that, Steele and Anne go to his hotel room, they have wine together, and engage in adult activities multiple times. I'm not sure what changed, why she decided, oh, it's okay for me to do adult things with him now. He hasn't acted differently. He still treats her like garbage and insults her all the time and acts like he doesn't care. You know the only thing he cares about? West Edmonton Mall, which is the largest indoor mall in the world. Steele wants to visit all of the stores and attractions. They get described in so much detail, it feels like I'm reading an advertisement for this mall. At one point, Steele pulls out brochures for a hotel and describes their various rooms. I wonder if the author was paid for that. I haven't liked any of the books so far, so it's no surprise I disliked the final part of the book. We get 50 pages around a misunderstanding. Steele tells Anne, your stepmother thinks we should have kids. Anne is heartbroken because he said we should have kids. We should have kids? That means he wants to have kids with somebody else. No, Anne. Do you know what the word we means? He said we should have kids to you. That clearly means he wants children with you. Instead, Anne assumes he wants to have children with her stepmother, so we get 50 pages of her whining about this because she doesn't like him anymore. Eventually, the stepmother clears up the misunderstanding, and Anne feels better about doing adult activities with Steele. The end. Post-book follow-up. I did not like this book at all. Steele is a terrible person. I did not want Anne to end up with him. She deserves better than the controlling manipulator who's always insulting her. I expected the book would try to redeem him at the end, like he'd give a big dramatic speech where he says he loves her and he went through all this trouble so he could be with her forever. But no, he never says he loves her, and he never explains why he went through so much trouble to see her, beyond his claim that he thought her dad might be dying of cancer. Anne's an okay protagonist. I could see her working fine in a different book, where the story doesn't demand she throw temper tantrums and put up with constant abuse from a guy just because he's hot. I think the only positive thing I can say is that this book does a decent job with the Christmas setting. It also does a good job advertising West Edmonton Mall. The mall had more development and focus than, say, Anne's boyfriend and sister combined. I take 5 points off a book score if it has bad sexist material. I'd say the sexual assault posing as a romantic moment certainly qualifies. I give Harlequin number 3342 gift wrapped a 0 out of 10.